All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into some tech world drama.
Oh, yeah.
You guys wanted to get up to speed on all this spicy stuff that Mark Zuckerberg has been saying about Apple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you, he did not hold back.
No, he did not.
We've got excerpts from a recent article that really captures all the juicy details.
All the shade.
All the shade.
It's fantastic.
And I can't wait to break it down with you.
Yeah, this is, it's going to be a good one.
It's going to be a good one.
It's interesting because, this goes beyond just, a personality clash,
Right.
Zuckerberg's criticisms really tap into, a much bigger debate that's been going on, about how much control companies, especially companies like Apple, should have over their ecosystems.
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg's main point of contention, it seems to me, is that Apple hasn't really, truly innovated.
Yeah.
Since the original iPhone.
Right.
He's arguing that they've just become complacent and they're relying on their dominant market position instead of really pushing the boundaries of what's technologically possible.
Yeah, and he uses this term, the walled garden,
Right.
to illustrate this point, right? Apple has this very tight control over everything in its ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
The hardware, the software, how you get apps.
Yeah.
And, they argue that this is to make sure users have a good experience.
Right, that seamless experience.
Right, a secure experience. And it is, to be fair, it is a very nice experience.
Yeah.
But for developers, especially developers like Zuckerberg,
Yeah.
it's very frustrating.
So it's kind of like Apple is saying, we know what's best for you.
Right.
And Zuckerberg is pushing back and saying, no, let developers and users have more freedom.
Right.
So can you give a specific example? What does this look like?
Sure, yeah. So imagine you're a developer and you're making a new app, like an AR app,
Okay.
that needs to use the camera. In Apple's world, you have to get their permission to use the camera in this new way. Right.
And they might say no, or they might say yes, but you can only use it in this limited way.
Yeah.
But in a more open system, you would just, you'd have the freedom to use it however you want and really come up with new creative ideas.
Yeah.
And Zuckerberg's argument is that this stifles innovation.
I see.
It slows down progress.
And he doesn't mince words when it comes to criticizing Apple.
No, he doesn't.
He makes this pretty bold statement, he says, and I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
It's like Steve Jobs invented the iPhone and they've just been sitting on it for the last 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
I mean, is that fair?
It's definitely a provocative statement.
Yeah.
I think it plays into this narrative that Apple's not really innovating anymore.
You're right.
That they're just kind of coasting, resting on their laurels.
Content with these incremental updates rather than big leaps forward.
Right.
But then again, it's hard to judge innovation, right?
Right.
Who's to say what's truly innovative? Right. And Apple would say that they are innovating, that they're just focusing on different things now.
Okay.
Refining things, making sure everything works together seamlessly.
Right, building that whole ecosystem that we talked about.
Right.
Okay, so Zuckerberg obviously has some strong opinions about Apple's approach to innovation.
He does.
But he doesn't stop there.
No.
He also gets into the financial side of things. He claims that Apple is squeezing people
Oh, yeah.
with this 30% commission that they take from developers.
Right, which is a lot.
It's a huge cut, yeah. And he also complains about how they're pushing consumers to buy these expensive peripherals.
Like AirPods.
Like AirPods, yeah.
Yeah.
So this brings us to a major point of tension between Apple and these developers, right?
Absolutely. Especially large companies like Meta.
Yeah.
That 30% cut is a lot of money.
Especially when you're operating at their scale.
Right, exactly.
Zuckerberg even claims that Meta's profits could double if Apple relaxed its rules.
Wow.
I mean, wow.
That's a big claim.
That is a big claim. But of course, Apple has its own justifications for charging what they charge.
Yeah.
They say they need that money to maintain the App Store and to ensure that users are getting high-quality apps.
Right. They say it costs money to make sure everything's safe and secure.
Okay, so is Zuckerberg just being greedy?
I mean...
Or is there a legitimate concern here?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I mean, Apple's business model is built around this closed ecosystem.
Right.
And they make a lot of money from it.
Right.
So they're not going to change it unless they really have to.
Yeah.
But I do think Zuckerberg's comments raise some important questions.
Okay.
Is this level of control actually good for the tech industry as a whole?
Yeah, is this stifling competition?
Exactly.
And speaking of competition, Zuckerberg also had something to say about Apple's new Vision Pro headset.
Oh, yeah.
Their big attempt to break into this new market. He said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, something like, it's their biggest swing at doing something new in a while, but the V1 definitely didn't hit it out of the park. Why do you think he felt the need to comment on that specifically?
Well, I think this is where things get really interesting. Because the Vision Pro is Apple trying to get into spatial computing,
Right.
which has the potential to be huge.
Okay.
Like, it could totally change how we interact with technology.
Okay, so can you explain what spatial computing is?
So imagine a world where, like, digital information is all around you.
Okay.
Not just on screens,
Yeah.
but like floating in the air, integrated into your surroundings.
Like holograms and stuff?
Yeah, kind of like that.
I'm picturing like Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
you could have 3D objects,
Yeah.
data, even like virtual people
Whoa.
appearing as if they're right there in front of you.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
I can see why Apple and Meta are both so interested in this.
Oh, yeah.
But how does Zuckerberg's comment about the Vision Pro fit into all of this?
Well, Meta's also investing heavily in spatial computing, right? They're building their own hardware and software for the metaverse.
Right, which is like their vision for this immersive virtual world.
Exactly.
So by downplaying the success of the Vision Pro, is Zuckerberg trying to position Meta as the leader in this space?
It's possible.
Okay, so this is bigger than just Apple's current practices.
Yeah.
It's about who will control the future of computing.
Exactly. It's about who gets to define what spatial computing is and how it works.
That puts Zuckerberg's comments in a whole new light.
Right. And it sets the stage for a really fascinating discussion about all the challenges and opportunities that come with this new technology.
I'm hooked. This is way more than just some tech world drama.
Oh, it's way more than that.
It's a battle for the future of how we interact with the digital world.
Absolutely.
Okay, I can't wait to keep going.
Me too.
This is getting good.
Yeah, it is.
So we were talking about spatial computing and how the Vision Pro hasn't really been this huge success.
Yeah.
Is Zuckerberg just taking a jab at Apple?
I mean,
Or is something else going on here?
I think it's important to remember that Apple, they play the long game.
Yeah, they do.
They're not always the first to come out with something.
Right.
But they like to refine things, iterate.
Make it really good.
Yeah. I mean, think about the iPod.
Oh, yeah.
The first iPod was pretty clunky.
Yeah, totally. Those click wheels.
Right.
Yeah.
Compared to what we have now, it's night and day.
Totally. But, okay, so spatial computing.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be revolutionary.
Right.
But why hasn't it really taken off yet?
Oh, I think the technology itself is still developing,
Okay.
It's really hard to make these immersive experiences where the digital world blends seamlessly with the real world.
Right.
You need advancements in display technology, 3D rendering,
Yeah.
and then the user interface.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even control things in a 3D environment?
Right. It's not as simple as just putting on a pair of goggles.
Exactly.
And also, let's be real, the Vision Pro is not cheap,
No, it's not.
like most people.
It's expensive.
Can't afford that.
Yeah. Cost is definitely a barrier.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole chicken and egg problem.
Oh, yeah.
Developers don't want to make apps
Yeah.
if there aren't enough users.
Right.
And people aren't going to buy the device if there aren't any good apps.
So it was kind of a stalemate.
Exactly.
And that brings us back to Zuckerberg and Meta.
Yeah.
They're going all in on the metaverse, right?
They are, and they're taking a different approach than Apple.
Okay, how so?
Well, Apple is all about this high-end hardware
Yeah.
and a very controlled app ecosystem. Meta is more open.
Okay.
They want the metaverse to be accessible to everyone, regardless of what device they're using.
So it's like Apple is building this exclusive club,
Yeah,
and Meta is trying to create a public park.
that's a good analogy.
But didn't Zuckerberg also say that Apple's approach is actually holding back spatial computing?
Yeah, he argued that their restrictions on developers make it harder to innovate.
Okay.
For example, Apple has these rules about how apps can use the camera
Yeah.
and the sensors on the device, and that could limit what developers can do with spatial computing.
So is it possible that Apple's control freak tendencies could actually backfire?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
Too much control can stifle creativity, and that's what's needed
Yeah.
to push this technology forward.
And Zuckerberg is basically saying,
Yeah.
come join me in the metaverse,
Right.
where you'll have the freedom
Yeah.
to build whatever you want.
Exactly. He's painting Meta as the champion of an open metaverse.
Okay, but isn't Meta building their own walled garden?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? They
Yeah.
talk a lot about openness, but
Yeah.
will they actually follow through?
Yeah.
Will the metaverse really be this interconnected space
Right.
where you can move seamlessly between different platforms?
Yeah, because ultimately they'll have control over it.
Right, and that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
We have to be critical, not just get caught up in the hype.
Right, because it's easy to get excited about new technology.
Yeah.
But we also need to think about
Yeah,
the motivations of the companies behind it.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these two tech giants,
Yeah,
two very different visions,
two very different approaches.
and a lot of uncertainty about the future.
A lot of unknowns.
But before we move on,
Yeah.
there's one more thing I want to talk about.
Okay.
Zuckerberg really went after Apple
He did?
for using privacy and security as a justification
Yeah.
for all their restrictions. And he didn't seem to buy it at all.
No, he didn't.
Is he just trying to score points? Or is there something to this?
I think it's a valid concern.
Okay.
This is one of the biggest debates in tech right now.
Yeah.
The balance between privacy and developer freedom.
Right.
It's a really complex issue,
Yeah.
and we're going to dive into it
Okay.
in the next part of the show.
All right. Sounds like we're about to head into some deep waters.
We are.
Can't wait. Okay, so let's jump back into this whole privacy thing.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, because last time we were talking about whether Apple is really using security and privacy just as an excuse to like tighten their control.
Right. Like, is it genuine?
Yeah.
Or is it just a strategy?
Yeah.
And it's a question that a lot of people have been asking. I mean, on the one hand, Apple really does seem to care about user privacy.
Yeah.
They've done things like app tracking transparency,
Right.
which gives you more control over how apps use your data.
Yeah, like whether they can track you across different apps and websites.
Exactly.
But Zuckerberg seems to think that there's more to it than that.
Yeah, he's basically saying that these privacy measures are actually a way for Apple to maintain their dominance.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow that. Can you explain?
Sure. So think about it this way. By making it harder for third-party apps to track user data,
Yeah.
Apple's giving their own apps a huge advantage because their apps still have access to all this information
Yeah.
that other developers can't get.
Right, so they can use that information to make their apps better.
Exactly. They can do things like targeted advertising,
Yeah.
personalization, all sorts of things.
So it's like a win-win for Apple.
Right.
They get to be seen as the good guys, protecting user privacy, but they're also using it to their advantage.
Exactly. It's a clever strategy.
Yeah, it's a little bit cynical.
Yeah. I mean, is it genuine or is it just business? It's hard to say.
Right, and is there any actual proof that they're doing this?
Well, there have been some cases where Apple's policies have been called anti-competitive.
Okay, like what?
Well, for example, they've faced scrutiny over their rules around cloud gaming services,
Okay.
which some people see as a way to protect their own App Store revenue.
Right, because if people are streaming games from the cloud, they're not buying as many games from the App Store.
Exactly.
So it's all connected.
It is, and it really highlights this tension between
Yeah.
user privacy and a competitive market.
Because on the one hand, we want our data to be protected,
Of course.
and we want companies to take privacy seriously.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we also want innovation.
Yeah,
We want a market where new ideas can thrive.
exactly. And finding that balance is really tricky.
Yeah.
It is.
It's not easy.
It's like we're in this new territory.
We are. It's like the Wild West of tech right now.
Yeah, and we're still figuring out the rules.
Exactly. And Zuckerberg's comments, even if you don't agree with everything he said, have definitely started an important conversation
Yeah, they have.
about the power dynamics in the tech world.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that technology is serving us?
Right. And not the other way around.
Exactly.
Okay. So, to wrap things up,
Yeah.
let's leave our listeners with a question.
As we move into this future of spatial computing, the metaverse, all of that, how do we find that balance?
That's the big question.
How do we protect privacy, encourage innovation, and keep the market competitive?
It's something we all need to think about.
Yeah. Not just as consumers,
Yeah.
but as citizens.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all the time we have for today.
Great discussion.
Yeah, thanks for diving deep with us.
It was fun.
Catch you next time.